Welcome to the materials and tools that you'll be using for making chainmail in this tutorial. First of all, we have the jump rings. And the jump rings are just what they sound like. Piles and piles of rings, from the absurdly small to the absurdly large. But we're going to be using something that's in between. Now, what we're going to be using is a material that's called bright aluminum, which is softer than some of the materials that would have been used for actually making chainmail, such as iron or bronze or even brass. There are two things you need to know about a jump ring. First, how thick the wire is. Now this here is 16 gauge wire, and it goes to, there are even people who will work with 22 gauge wire, which is very small, or 14 or even 12 gauge wire, which is very large and thick. So you need to know the gauge of the wire, how thick the wire is, and you also need to know the inner diameter. You need to know what the distance is across on the inside of the jump ring, not the outside of the jump ring. That's very important. If you decide that you want to order jump rings, sometimes you'll find that suppliers will tell you the OD, or the outer diameter. You need the inner diameter to really be able to understand and be able to create the weaves you're looking for. So we have the thickness of the wire, the gauge, the distance across on the inside, or the inner diameter, and then you also need to know about your kerf. The kerf is your opening, and your mission is to make sure that the kerf is closed so well that you can't see where your openings are. And that's really going to be one of the hardest things that you engage in with this particular weave. The weave itself isn't terribly challenging, but getting these closed can be. And then the next thing we're going to look at are our tools. Of course, we'll be using pliers, and I have several pliers. The first I have are your basic bent nose pliers that I got from Hobby Lobby. I like to use these when I'm in my right hand, facing outward. And these can be anywhere ranging from $6 to $18, depending on your quality. And you also can get these from Harbor Freight. Now these were close to $2. If I'm doing something that's a little more delicate, I'm going to use my jewelry tools, but for something like this, I will definitely use something that's a little less expensive. And then the other that I like to use are chain nose pliers. So if you notice these chain nose pliers, at the bottom they have a place right here, and that's actually for wire cutting. So if you decide you want to start incorporating your chainmail into with other materials, and you start to use wire weaving, or you decide you want to make some earrings and you have beads at the bottom, or you want to bead your chainmail, these are a really good purchase, because then you're only carrying two type tools around, and you don't have a sharp cutting thing, or as sharp like if you had your wire cutters with you. So again, these are the basic tools right here, your pliers, and your materials that you're going to need for making jump rings, making chainmail. Thank you. Welcome to the part of the tutorial where I talk about opening and closing the jump rings. So you'll notice again that we have the kerf, or that little area where the saw is cut away, and your job is to line up both sides of this so that you can't tell that there was an opening there before. So what I do, and you don't have to do it this way, I just take my bent nose pliers, and I usually hold them in my right hand, nose pointing outward, and I take the other set and I put them in my left, and then I just twist toward and away. So you're not pulling the rings apart like this, you're actually twisting. And then you just want to have it open enough that you can put another jump ring through it. So it really depends on the thickness. What you don't want to do is this, where you open the jump ring so wide that it warps it. And a lot of times beginners will do this. They're so excited about opening that they'll do this deal. And that makes it really hard to close back into a good shape. All right, so I've warped that one, so let's do this one. we're going to close this one. All right, so with this, when you're closing it, you're going to put a little bit of pressure on. You're going to go toward the innard, and you're going to come just a little bit past the edge, and then you're going to bring it back. And what you're listening for is this beautiful click. So you're going to notice that your ring is closed. And sometimes it'll be maybe a little warped. And if it's that, you can just take your pliers and you can kind of straighten it out. And what you'll notice is also with these thicker ones that the ring will work its way back out. So sometimes you have to go back through your project and close all your rings again. So that's opening and closing your jump rings. Now that you've opened up or closed all your rings, you're going to take one open ring and you're going to put 4 jump rings on it. And then you're going to close that. So you're going to have 4 and 1, the name of the weave. And then you're going to lay it out. Now, a lot of times people get to this point and they get a little freaked out because it's just a jumble of rings. Well, you have to straighten it out. So what you're going to do is you're going to take these rings and you're going to lay them out like this. All right, you're going to turn it around like this. What you're going to notice is that these rings, these 2 are out open like Mickey Mouse ears, but they're on the bottom, these on top. And then the center ring is pointing up this way and it's on top. So if you're trying to work with your rings going this way, notice how the ring is at the bottom, the center ring. It's not going to work. So you want your working end to be positioned like this. So over here, what I've done is I've taken my rings and I've put 2 closed rings on 1 open. And I've just laid them out like that so that I can work well. So I'm going to pick up this, my piece right here, my unit. And I'm going to hold it like this. And I'm going to have these rings laid out to the side like this. I'm going to take this unit and I'm going to put it down, like I'm going to poke my finger, and I'm going to come up the other side like this. And it's going to capture those 2 rings. And then I'm going to close it like this. Well, what's going to happen is you're eventually going to drop your piece, and once again it looks just like a jumble of rings. But what you're going to do is you're going to straighten them out till you have a set of rings on both sides. And once again, your center ring is on top pointing up. And that's what you're going to do for the rest of the weave. Now, there are several problems that people will run into when they're doing this. The first is sometimes people try to work from the wrong end. So once again, notice that the wrong end, you have the center ring underneath these 2 side rings. So what will happen if you do that is this. You're going to end up putting, even if you do it correctly, you're going to end up with your rings looking like this. So if that happens, you've probably started working from the wrong end. So you just take your rings off and you flip your piece over. Make sure your rings are laying correctly. Now the other, which is very similar to this, is people will take their unit and they'll start with this correctly oriented, but instead of going down and up, some people will come up and go down. And once again, you have that mess up. You've just made a chain and not the European 4-in-1 weave. The other thing that people will do is they'll start by going down, doing it correctly, but then they get their ring all fumbled up. And then they just try to catch it, and they end up just doing this weird thing. So if your rings look very strange, you've probably done something like this. And what you need to do is just pull it out and start over. And make sure that you go down and you come up. And then that you secure your ring like this. So you'll just do that until you have a length of 4 in one weave to whatever you want. You can make it long enough for a necklace, you can make it long enough for a bracelet. And if you decide to do it as a bracelet especially, you want to make sure that it's a little bit smaller than what you're looking for. If you want it tight, you want it just a little bit smaller than your wrist so that you can add your clasp to it. Now here with the clasp, because I'm using 16 gauge rings here, I need an 18 gauge ring to fit through the clasp itself. So I'm going to take this smaller ring, and what I'll do is take these 2 rings, and there are other ways of doing this. This is just how I do it. Take these 2 rings, and I'll put it around like this, and then just put it through the clasp and close it. Hear the click. And then the other side, it'll usually be all messed up, and all you have to do is just straighten it out so that it looks right. And then that end you're going to do the same thing, only you can do it with a thicker ring. And voila, you have your ending piece, and then you have your clasp. And then once you've made it to the length that you want, you have your chainmail piece, and you can wear it proudly wherever you would like to go.